So this reading Russia is a little different. Right now I'm flying to Alaska for the Putin-Trump summit. I'm on the final leg of the journey from Moscow, Frankfurt to Anchorage. Before taking off, I had a quick look at the online versions of this morning's Russian papers. What can we tell from them? Well, 2 days before the summit, there is no hint of compromise from Moscow on Ukraine, including on the key territorial issue. Moskovsky Komsomolets. Land liberated by Russia and fixed in our constitution as part of Russia is not up for discussion. It's not on the negotiating table in terms of physical territory. Maybe only the question of whether it would be internationally recognized as such. And Putin's statement last year about a ceasefire being conditional to Ukrainian armed forces withdrawing from there. As for what Trump said about the possible swapping of territories, the only compromises possible from the Russian side could concern the buffer zones in Kharkiv and Sumy regions, and with major caveats, for example, that these territories remain demilitarized. What the writer refers to as liberated land is Ukrainian territory that has been seized and occupied by Russia and which Moscow claims to have annexed. On the eve of the talks, the situation is clear. A diplomatic solution to the Ukraine crisis is of course preferable, and alas, this cannot happen without compromises. But Russia is also ready to achieve its goals militarily and is demonstrating that clearly. Then there's this article. Alaska is an example of the movability of state borders. They will inevitably talk about moving the borders between Russia and Ukraine. At the meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, there will inevitably be discussion of moving the borders between Russia and Ukraine. Alaska is an obvious example of the movability of state borders and the change of ownership of large territories. This happened a lot in the 19th century. In 1897, the Russian Empire sold Alaska to America for just $7.2 million, 1.5 million square kilometers of land was handed over. Borders were movable in the east and in the west. It was like that in the 19th century and in the 20th century, and it will be like that in the 21st century. So the message from Moscow is pretty stark, that it's okay to move borders, to change borders, to sell land, to grab land, to seize territory. That's where we're at in 2025. Izvestia reports the main agenda of the summit includes settling the Ukraine crisis, but the two sides may also discuss cooperation in other areas such as economic cooperation in the Arctic. Experts predict Moscow will be keen to boost bilateral relations with Washington even if there's little or no progress on Ukraine. And if there is little or no progress on Ukraine, clearly Moscow will try to blame Kiev and Europe. It's already pointing a finger. Izvestia writes, Brussels could be an obstacle to dialogue between Moscow and Washington. The European Commission insists that Ukraine and Europe should be at the negotiating table with Russia and the US, but the EU categorically opposes Kiev making the territorial concessions which are inevitable for compromise with Russia, whose forces are advancing quickly in the Donbass.